When it comes to making money online in 2026, everyone keeps talking about the best ecom business model, but if you've actually tried building one, you already know most advice online is recycled hype. One person says one thing, another person says the exact opposite. And meanwhile, you're stuck trying to figure out which model actually gives beginners a realistic shot at building something long-term and extremely profitable. So in this video, I'm breaking down the ecom business models people are rushing into, what each one actually is, and how to think about them before you waste the next 6 months jumping around again. My name is Michael Elliott. I've started and scaled multiple ecom brands, generating over $5 million in sales on Amazon. And I've talked to hundreds of beginners who want my advice on what it takes to actually make money in e-commerce and which business model is the best, and then rank them on this tier list. Let's start with the one everyone is currently obsessed with. TikTok Shop is the business model everyone's rushing into right now, and honestly, I get why. You don't have to be on camera and you don't need to build an audience. You don't even need a storefront. You just connect products to creators who will promote your product for you, and you only pay them every time they sell something for you. It can sound like the closest thing to shortcut money that exists in ecom, but the part most beginners don't understand is that TikTok Shop is built on volatility. The same algorithm that sends you 500 orders in a day can send you 0 the next. There's no compounding, no predictability, no long-term control. You're essentially building a business inside someone else's dopamine machine. And while it can scale fast, it collapses just as fast the second you lose momentum. That's why TikTok Shop is great for speed, but not great for lifespan. It teaches you some fundamentals, but it doesn't build anything that lasts unless you evolve it into something more stable. Now, the appeal of TikTok Shop is that the entry point feels frictionless. They see short videos going viral, they see creators posting for no upfront fee, and they assume that means success comes down to just listing a product and waiting. But working with creators is an entirely new skill set that you'll have to learn. And it's not as easy as it seems. Essentially, you're turning into a talent manager who works with the lowest tier talent available because the best influencers are only working with the best brands. And as a beginner, you're not going to convince them to promote your products. The whole point of ecom and entrepreneurship is to have the ability to control your success and not rely on other people for you to succeed. But if you go all in on TikTok Shop and work with these affiliates, you're doing the exact opposite. Another issue is always fulfillment. Beginners are so focused on getting creators to post that they forget TikTok might actually send hundreds of orders in a short period of time. Most manufacturers can't handle that, or they're shipping slowly, or they don't package correctly, or they run out of stock. And TikTok is strict. Late shipments and refunds can nuke your account overnight. The moment you get traction, your supplier and your ability to ship products becomes your biggest vulnerability. And that's the part most beginners never prepare for. TikTok also has their own fulfillment centers, but due to how volatile sales can be, it's quite difficult for beginners to estimate how much inventory they need to send and when to time the order so the fulfillment center receives it before their current inventory runs out. One last thing I want to mention about TikTok Shop is most beginners don't realize that it's still tiny. For comparison, TikTok Shop is less than 3% the size of Amazon, and more importantly, 50% of Americans have Amazon Prime, which means half of the country buys from Amazon by default. That level of built-in trust doesn't really exist on TikTok. People go there to be entertained, not to shop intentionally. That's why TikTok Shop has already built a reputation for being a place to buy cheap products, impulse buys, and low-quality items that go viral for a week and disappear the next. You might make fast money, but it's not great for building a brand that people actually remember. On Amazon, customers search with intent. They're already ready to buy. And on TikTok, you're trying to convince someone who was just scrolling for entertainment to suddenly pull out their card. That difference alone is why TikTok Shop will never give you the longevity that Amazon does. Now, with that being said, the business models that I'm going to cover in this list, I'm still going to put TikTok Shop in the A tier. Next up is wholesaling on Amazon. It's one of those models that sounds great on paper. You buy products from established brands, think like Nike or Adidas, then you list them on existing Amazon listings and make a small margin every time someone buys. It's predictable, it's lower risk, and it's way simpler than creating your own product from scratch. But the trade-off is that there's no ownership. You're sharing the same listing with 10, 20, sometimes 40 other sellers fighting for the buy box. And because the competition is so direct, margins get squeezed to the point where you're putting in a ton of effort for very little return. It's a model that works if you want quick experience or you want to learn Amazon's backend before doing something bigger, but it's not something that compounds. Nothing you build here lasts. No brand, no rankings, no defensibility. It's a stepping stone, not a destination. Now, a lot of beginners see this as a safe way to start selling on Amazon because wholesaling looks like a shortcut. You don't have to deal with product research at a deep level. You don't need to differentiate anything, and you don't need to really build an actual brand. You're basically just piggybacking off of somebody else's success. And for a beginner who just wants to get their feet wet, that feels safer than launching a product from scratch. But the safety is mostly an illusion. You're entering listings that already have established sellers who know how to protect their buy box share. It's stable, but only at the bottom end of the opportunity ladder. Which brings me to my next point. The biggest headache is always the buy box. Your entire revenue is dictated by whether you win or share the buy box with other sellers. Even if you do everything right, fast shipping, good account health, competitive pricing, you still might only get a fraction of the traffic. And if a big seller with better pricing enters a listing, you're done. You can be selling one day and selling nothing the next. The lack of control makes it almost impossible to forecast or scale consistently. Wholesaling teaches you Amazon basics, shipping plans, listing mechanics, account health, back-end workflows, and those skills are definitely useful, but none of them create leverage. You're not learning how to build a product, how to differentiate, how to rank, how to brand, or how to run ads. You're learning logistics, not long-term brand building. So after a few months, you hit a ceiling, right? The model stops growing unless you transition into something where you actually build an asset. Now, I'm gonna put this at the C-level tier just because I know of sellers who have been doing, 100K months, but after a year or less or more even as well, they get to a point where they're down to making 10K or less per month. And so that's the whole point, is just like, there's not enough control over this. And so for that reason, I'm gonna put it in the C tier. Now let's talk about Amazon FBA private label. Private label is the point where e-commerce and Amazon finally become a long-term and very profitable business, not just a hustle. Although there are a ton of people who start this as a side hustle initially. So instead of selling somebody else's product like you do in wholesaling, you're creating your own version of a proven product and building a brand around it. And because Amazon has built in trust, built in traffic, and built in buying intent, the upside is way bigger than anything you can do flipping products or chasing trends. This is the model where your work actually compounds. Every review, every ranking, every improvement you make to the listing increases your earning potential. And this is exactly why I always say private label is the real end game for Amazon sellers. You're not sharing the buy box with 30 other sellers. You're not waiting for creators to post. You're not praying the algorithm favors you today. You're building an asset you control. And by the way, if you want to see exactly how I built my brand from scratch, I have a free 4-hour Amazon FBA private label course on my channel that walks you through the entire process step by step. So of course my opinion will be biased, but it's because of how long I've been in the e-com space and how many beginners I've seen fail at other businesses due to unrealistic expectations. When you own the actual brand without relying on influencers to make you money, you control the product, the branding, the positioning, and the margins. Everything in wholesaling and retail arbitrage is reactive. You're reacting to distributor pricing, reacting to competition, reacting to listings you don't control, and private label is proactive. You choose what to sell, how to differentiate it, how to price it, and how to build it into something defensible. And when you own the listing, no one can undercut you or push you out. That shift alone changes everything. Not only that, but Amazon sales are much more stable compared to TikTok. Amazon is built on search intent, right? People aren't browsing for entertainment. They're typing in exactly what they want to buy. That means your success isn't tied to algorithms, virality, or influencers. It's tied to demand that already exists. And that demand doesn't disappear. Half of America has Prime, and Amazon holds the majority of e-commerce market share. When you rank well on a search term with strong intent, you're tapping into a consistent stream of buyers that return month after month, year after year. And if we look at the benefits you get as a beginner entrepreneur, private label forces you to learn real e-com fundamentals: product research, supplier negotiation, packaging, branding, listing optimization, PPC, customer experience, the actual levers that matter in this industry. You're not guessing, you're building. These are the same skills used by 7- and 8-figure brands, and once you learn them, you can replicate them across any product, any niche, any brand you launch in the future. It's the closest thing to a transferable e-com skill set. And so I'm gonna put this in the S tier because it is such a long-term game where you can have profits long-term, you're building up equity in something that you own, and you're learning the skills of entrepreneurship, which are going to be repeatable in the long term as well. All right, moving on. Let's talk about print on demand, or POD. Beginners love POD because it gives them the illusion of creativity and control without any risk. You feel like you're building a brand because you're designing something, customizing something, or adding your spin to a product. But what they don't realize is that the barrier to entry is zero. Anyone can upload a design in 10 minutes. That means you're competing with thousands of people who have the exact same idea. The part they don't see is the actual challenge. Niche research, design psychology, emotional triggers, and understanding what people actually want on a shirt or a mug. Without that depth, the store dies before it even begins. Now, one of the biggest issues is fulfillment speed. POD orders take longer to produce because each item is made on demand. Amazon has trained buyers to expect 2-day delivery. TikTok has trained buyers to expect impulse wins. POD can often take 5 to 12 days just to ship. When buyers see these delivery times, conversion rates tank, especially on non-Amazon platforms. And even if a buyer purchases, long fulfillment times increase refund rates and customer complaints. Most beginners ignore this until they get hit with the operational burden. The successful POD stores always go extremely niche. They're not selling funny shirts, they're selling shirts for nurses who work night shifts, or dog owners of a specific breed, or people obsessed with a micro hobby. The more specific the niche, the easier it is to create designs that feel personal. Beginners try to sell to everyone and end up selling to no one. The winners pick a niche and build 50 to 100 designs around that one audience, testing relentlessly until they find the ones that emotionally click. Most beginners also don't realize how strict copyright laws are with POD. You can't just take a quote from a popular TV show, copy a character, or use a famous logo and slap it on a shirt. That's illegal. And platforms shut you down instantly for it. A lot of new sellers think, well, everyone else is doing it, but what they don't see is that most of those stores get removed within a week. You have to create original designs or use concepts that aren't tied to someone else's intellectual property. And that's where beginners get stuck. They don't actually know how to come up with creative angles without leaning on the popularity of a show, a meme, a movie, or a celebrity. If you don't understand that line, POD goes from easy money to account terminated very quickly. Now I'm gonna put this in tier level D, one, because I'm just not extremely well versed in POD, but I still don't see it as a viable option for a long-term brand as much as I do with the different business models that we've talked about so far. Next is digital products. Digital products always sound like the dream. No inventory, no shipping, unlimited scalability, and margins that beat every single physical product on the planet. And all of that is true if you already have a valuable skill or something people actually want to learn from you. But that's the part beginners miss. They see creators selling templates, ebooks, guides, presets, and courses and assume it's as simple as packaging up information and listing it online. But the digital products don't sell because they're digital. They sell because the person behind them has authority, expertise, or proof. If you're a beginner with no track record, no audience, and no differentiator, digital products become one of the hardest models to get traction with. It looks simple, but it requires more credibility than almost any other model. And without that credibility, your product becomes just another file that gets lost in a marketplace full of identical offers. When you sell digital products, you're not really in the Ecom game. You're actually in the personal branding game, because digital products sell on trust. If there's no face, no proof, no track record, and no reason to believe you know what you are talking about, why would someone pay for your service? With physical products, the customer buys the product. With digital products, they're buying you. If you don't have an audience, you either need authority in a niche or you need to buy ads. And ads for digital products are notoriously difficult without strong proof. That's why most beginners end up stuck. They try to sell without having built the trust required. Now, the winners here always solve a very specific problem. They aren't selling Notion templates. They're selling a Notion template for real estate agents who manage 20 listings. They aren't selling fitness guides. They're selling a guide for new moms who want a 20-minute daily routine. The more specific the problem, the easier it is to communicate value. Beginners fail because they make products for everyone, which means they're useful to no one. Successful digital product sellers go hyper niche and focus on solving one clear pain point extremely well. Now, the tier I'm gonna put it at is A tier just because of the high margins and the scalability of it. But for a lot of people, this might fall into, say, the B tier or something, because you're also dealing with people a lot more. And so it's a lot more work than it is with product-based businesses. But in my eyes, I would still say I'd put it kind of in the A tier, just because of those benefits of the margins and the scalability. Next up is branded dropshipping, where beginners finally start moving away from the quick hit, opportunistic mindset and step into something that looks more like a real business. Instead of relying on random viral products, you're taking one product, building branding around it, improving the content, tightening up the landing page, and creating a real customer experience. It's still dropshipping, so you're not holding inventory, but the way you present the product and position, it feels like a legitimate brand. Problem is that most beginners stop halfway. They call it branded, but they're still using the same supplier photos, the same generic packaging, the same content angles as every other seller. True branded dropshipping requires actual differentiation, custom creatives, cohesive branding, refined messaging, and an actual offer. When you do it right, it can be a bridge into something long-term. But when you do it the way most beginners do it, it's just glorified dropshipping with nicer colors. The execution is everything. Beginners see the surface level elements, a logo, a clean website, some aesthetic colors, and assume that's the entire strategy. But real branding is about perception, positioning, and the promise your product makes. It's about how you communicate value, how you differentiate from competitors, and how the product feels to the customer. Beginners try to copy the visuals, but not the strategy behind the visuals, so their branding doesn't actually change anything. One of the most common issues I see here is shipping times and consistency. Even if your website is polished and your creatives are solid, if your product takes 2 to 3 weeks to arrive, customers are going to complain. Refunds go up, chargebacks go up, your ad account health gets worse. And that's what stops most branded dropshippers from scaling long-term. You can't run true volume without reliable fulfillment. That's why branded dropshipping is often the middle point between testing something fast and eventually transitioning to bulk orders or Amazon FBA if you want stability. That being said, it can be a good training ground for bigger things. But the reason I'm still such a huge fan of Amazon is because if you pause your ads for your dropshipping products, then you're also pausing your sales. But Amazon is a marketplace where once you rank a listing, you can pause ads and maybe things will slow down a little bit, but it's still going to be pretty consistent and reliable long-term. So for these reasons, I'm going to put branded dropshipping at a B tier. And real quick, I want to mention retail arbitrage. It's usually the very first place beginners go when they discover Amazon because it feels tangible. You walk into a Walmart, Target, TJ Maxx, scan products with the Amazon seller app, find something selling for more online and flip it for a quick profit. And honestly, for learning the basics of Amazon, how listings work, how fees work, how shipments work, arbitrage is actually pretty solid, but it gives you real reps without needing to risk thousands of dollars. But the problem is exactly that. It teaches you the basics and then traps you there. The entire model relies on you hunting for clearance items and hoping you find something worth flipping. There's no control, no scalability, and no compounding effect. When you stop scanning, the money stops coming in. It's not really an e-commerce business. It's more of a temporary income source that shows you how Amazon works before you graduate into something real. Honestly, that's kind of all there is to it. If you're struggling for cash, maybe it's something you want to try, but also you'd probably learn faster and make more money if you just get a minimum wage job and use your extra time studying actual e-commerce and brand building. Because of these reasons, I'm gonna place this at an E-level tier. Last up, we have organic dropshipping. Basically, it's when you use short form content to sell a product, which means you don't need to pay for ads and you don't need to be an influencer. This is completely faceless content. The skill gap here is learning how to make viral content, and when one of your videos finally pops, you drive that traffic to your store. It's cheap to start and feels like a fast path to sales, but the reality is that the model is extremely unstable. You're fully dependent on an algorithm that changes constantly, and even when you get a viral hit, it rarely lasts longer than a few days. There's no compounding, no ranking system, no long-term retention, just a cycle of constantly trying to recreate the last viral moment. And because you don't own the platform or the distribution, you're essentially gambling with content, hoping for a spike. It teaches you creativity and marketing principles for sure, but it doesn't provide enough control. And without control, you don't have a business. You have momentum that comes and goes on TikTok or Instagram's terms. For the best chance of making this work, the product should be extremely visual, pattern interrupt products, cleaning gadgets, kitchen tools, pet products, oddly satisfying items, anything that stops the scroll instantly. The reason these products perform well is because the entire model depends on capturing attention in the first 2 seconds. If the product doesn't visually explain itself, if it doesn't hook instantly, or if it needs a lot of storytelling, it won't perform. So you're relying on impulse buys. So ultimately, it is a low barrier of entry and will teach some basic marketing skills, but doesn't set you up to make real money long term. Kind of like playing in sandbox mode, learning some skills that you can transfer to a better opportunity vehicle. For those reasons, I'm going to put this in the D tier list along with POD. At the end of the day, every one of these business models can make money, but they're not all equal. Some give you speed, some give you experience, some give you a quick dopamine hit, but only a few actually give you control and long-term stability. And that's the whole point of doing a tier list like this, not to convince you to chase the trend, but to help you understand which model actually lines up with the kind of business you want to build. If you're someone who wants to take the long-term route and actually build an asset you own, not rely on algorithms or hype cycles, Amazon FBA private label will always be the model I recommend. And if you want help getting started the right way, I put together a free 4-hour Amazon FBA course on my channel that walks you step by step through product research, differentiation, launch strategy, everything. It's completely free and it'll save you months of trial and error. So check that out if you're serious about building something real, and I'll see you in the next video.